Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here this morning. Again, my name is John Ford. I am with Humboldt County Planning and Building Department. And just kind of as a preference, we are in the early stages of beginning to address sea level rise within our update of the Humboldt Bay Area Plan. And so a lot of what I will say today will be related to the existing regulatory framework in which we operate, and a lot of that just to put all agendas out on the table. A lot of that policy framework relates to preserving existing agricultural uses and providing allowances to protect those agricultural uses. Sea level rise is, pardon the pun, but it's an intrusion upon that existing policy framework and something that we're going to have to reconcile. So if I'm successful in the next 15 minutes, you will leave here today understanding some of the policy tensions that are involved in addressing the existing agricultural uses and adapting to sea level rise, and you will want to participate as the county process moves forward. So some of what we'll talk about is the areas of projected flooding from sea level rise at the county's end, how the county's plan will work to, or currently works to protect agricultural assets now, and start to think about other ways the county's plan could help protect those assets in the future. So what we see in this slide is the northern area around Humboldt Bay that is already subject to flooding from high tides. As Alderon has already pointed out, there is an upward progression in the existing context of areas that are subject to inundation. So the areas in green and blue show existing areas within the North Bay that are currently flooded at some point. So if we add this in, the yellow then would start to show the areas around the north end of Humboldt Bay that would be subject to inundation with 1 meter rise in water surface elevation. So we're adding this in to start to show the regulatory context. Is the yellow is still there, and then the areas that you see that kind of show the light green, which were some of the areas up on the north end and the bottoms that are some of the irrigated cropland, start to show the areas that are zoned agricultural exclusive. So those are areas that are identified as being agricultural lands, and areas where there's some allowances to currently to protect those lands. Now this is an important slide since there has been an awful lot of discussion on the aging dikes in the area that were put in order to protect ag lands. The yellow lines that you see there represent areas that currently have dikes in place and are there to protect those agricultural lands. Going to do the same thing around the south end of the bay. This is existing areas that are subject to inundation. This would be the areas that would be subject to inundation with a 3 meter or a 1 meter increase in sea level rise. Again, starting to show the areas now that are agricultural lands in relationship to that. And showing the dikes in the southern portion of the bay. So right now, the county works to protect agricultural assets. The current language allows diking and filling within what's called transitional agricultural lands for modification or repair of existing dikes that are threatened by erosion. In this, the policy goes on to state that this needs to be done in the least environmentally damaging manner. The desire is to maintain an adequate distance from tidal or non-tidal sloughs. So there's a tension here that we want to protect agricultural lands and want to do it in a way that minimizes impact upon the environment. But the thing that starts to happen is you look at other policies, and there are areas within the policy that start to talk about, oops, I didn't go quite far.
Department. Wetland buffer areas. And one of the things that starts to happen is that development, modifying structures, modifying dikes and things within wetland buffer areas are much more highly regulated. Probably from a landowner standpoint, the transitional agricultural lands that are in areas designated agricultural exclusive are excluded from the wetland buffer. So within those areas, there's still the ability to perform maintenance, there's still the ability to maintain dikes, there's still the ability to do that work. But this is going to become increasingly difficult as sea level rise continues to occur, because the wetlands, the areas that are identified as wetlands are going to continue to encroach upon areas that are currently agricultural lands. So one of the things we're struggling with is how best to start to develop adaptation strategies. And some of the thoughts that we've come up with is trying to pre-permit, repair, maintain dikes for in anticipation of sea level rise. Adding exclusions for repair and maintenance of dikes for sea level rise, or adding repair and maintenance of dikes for sea level rise to the de minimis waiver category of development. Some of the things that also need to be considered is the ability to provide some of the mitigation, and whether some of the areas that are currently being transitioned into wetlands would serve as that mitigation, or in the process identifying areas that would be really hard to maintain and count that towards mitigation so that property owners would be free to be able to protect their property. The reality, though, is this requires state, local, and intergovernmental coordination to make sure that we're all operating on a common ground. I think the next slide begins to show some of the tension that we have. Is the area in red is the area of state retained jurisdiction. So this would be the area, as Melissa spoke earlier, the areas that the county would not have any jurisdiction. And so when we start to look at this, we would see that there's an awful lot of area that even developing local policies and regulations to address sea level rise, to address adaptation, there's still a lot of area that would still fall under state regulation. This then shows, with 1 meter increase in water surface elevation, the area in red is, again, the state retained jurisdiction. The area in blue is the area that the county would actually have jurisdiction. So one of the things that you will want to see here is that all the dikes, all the areas where improvements would largely be needed are completely within state jurisdiction. And so the important point that I want to walk away from here, kind of leaving you with this thought, is that we really need to all collaborate. The landowners, the county, Arcata, Eureka, the state, if I didn't say that already, we need to be on the same page in terms of what we're trying to do, what we're prioritizing, the areas that may be less able to protect and so become mitigation areas. Because when it comes down to it, this is our struggle. Is that most of what we're talking about is really within state permitting authority. And so we all need to be in a place where we understand what the run rules are, where we understand where the policy guidance is, and that we can then be firm in our understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, whether we're talking to the county, whether we're talking to the city, whether we're talking to the state. And just in the nature of a little bit of fun here, something that Aldron provides to us is who's going to protect us from sea level rise. And as he mentioned earlier, our primary constituents out there are the people that are actively utilizing that aggregate. And it's not going to be an easy solution. The policy development won't be easy. The policy implementation won't be easy. And so I would anticipate that the public forums that we're going to be having, the discussions that we're going to be having, will be full of lots of different ideas. And so if I could encourage you to just put a note in your mind that probably the preeminent need here is to be participating in the update of the Humboldt Bay Area Plan, so that all the voices are heard, and that so that when it's finally adopted by the Coastal Commission, assuming that it is, that it's something that represents all of the local interests, all of the local needs, and then it's something that's usable to us all. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have David Loya, the Community Development Director for the City of Arcata, talking about how the Arcata's local coastal program is being updated to address sea level rise.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you to all of you for spending the morning looking into this topic. You know, it's kind of interesting as we were rearranging the podium, and given the nature of the discussion today, I was kind of thinking of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. So, for whatever that's worth. As I was looking, you know, I was signing up this morning, there's a checklist, I hope you all checked in. As I was looking through that, I just started flipping through the pages and kind of looking at the last column where it talked about who was represented today. And I thought it was kind of an interesting, that most of us, I believe, are from the government or from an agency. So if you don't mind, if I could just have a quick show of hands of landowners. Yeah, that's about what I had at Peg. It's about 10% or less. So, you know, also, you know, to use another cliche, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, which is good. It's good to preach to the choir. But I think that, you know, one of the hallmarks for this event and something that Joe had pointed out was that really what we need to be doing is engagement, and engagement on a deeper level than just tell us what you think. I think it needs to be engagement on a level where we're actually helping to formulate transitions in not just policy and implementation at the local level, but evaluating each and every agency's policy and legal framework to identify where we need to make changes on a state level to accommodate this new event. Most of our policy is based on pre-sea level rise understanding. The Coastal Act was adopted in 1976, way before anybody knew about sea level rise, right? And so this is a significant challenge for us, and it affects many people. Outside of these inundation areas, you know, I mean, it could be dramatic, what people are saying. The new predictions that, you know, you could have 10 feet of sea level rise and whatnot. I mean, this is a picture of Arcata looking northwest from Jacoby Creek watershed, and that's a, you know, that's a relatively high tide. That's current time, king tide. That's what we're dealing with right now. You know, razor thin margin between our wastewater treatment plant, our world-renowned wastewater treatment plant, and the bay. And I have to admit, you know, most of my focus in developing the sea level policies that we've been dealing with in the city of Arcata has been on infrastructure. And so I've been looking at this area right here, concerned with what's going to go on with our wastewater treatment plant, what's going to happen with, you know, all of the development that's out there. You know, how are we going to protect inland impacts, areas that are beyond where these projected sea level rise projections are showing us inundation will happen, because water kind of stacks on itself, and we have a bunch of creeks in the Arcata bottoms that come right through the downtown. There are going to be impacts on, you know, huge areas, huge expanses of the city of Arcata, potentially. And I have to admit, you know, I gave short shrift to ag lands for a long time in this process, because I was really focused on where I saw lots of dollars invested. And I just kind of want to echo what I heard Jonathan say first thing this morning. What I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan, but what I heard was these low-lying reclaimed former tidelands are some of the most productive ag lands that we have in the county. And one of the problems is not sea level rise, not inundation, not flooding, not saltwater intrusion. It's the government. The government is the problem. We are the problem. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out. And I'm going to fess up. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. The city of Arcata owns this entire expanse of ag land over here on the southern part. And we just bought what was ag land and turned it into a wetland. And I think if I could sort of assume that I know what Jonathan's talking about, that's one of the problems. And so really what we have right here is a really real and imminent tension between the efforts that we need to do in order to prepare for and adapt and modify and retreat and maintaining these highly productive ag lands. That's my introduction. So just to orient real quick here, we were looking from right around here, there's Jacoby Creek watershed, we were looking this direction in that last slide. South G Street, City of Arcata is right there in the bay. Obviously North Bay is the area that we're most interested in for the City of Arcata. As I mentioned, the city owns the majority of this ag land and these former ag lands over here. So I'm just going to run through super quickly. You've already seen all the inundation maps. I want to give a slightly different spin on it. Those lands are reclaimed former tidelands. They're really low. These are LIDAR elevations going, progressively higher, you would imagine. It's the same as the former tidelands. These are the marshlands that Alderon had talked about earlier. And these are also what some projections are saying that either now, if the levees were breached, or sometime in 100 years, 70 years from now, we're going to have inundation if we don't do something about it. So this is the vulnerability area, and the idea is, well, what are we doing about it? Can you stop sea level rise from happening? Maybe to some extent for a period of time, right? So again, just overlaying those images next to each other, LIDAR and the aerial image, so that you can get a sense for where these areas are and what the impacts are going to be. Given that area is inundated, and that area is the principal area of ag lands in the city of Arcata, for Arcata at least, it'll be pretty dramatic on the productive ag lands for us. And I want to say, even though we are the problem, we're also the solution. The city of Arcata actually grazes this land. We have leases, it's still in productive ag, but it has multiple other uses. As Alderon pointed out, there's some infrastructure out there. We've restored some of this for habitat values, and frankly, the city of Arcata, one of the main reasons we were buying it is so that it doesn't get developed. It's part of our climate change adaptation strategy to acquire these low-lying lands, at the same time trying to keep them in productivity while we can. So here are the numbers, and I know you can't read this up in the top here, but this green area is the area that's zoned as ag. So predominantly the area of potential inundation is zoned ag. The city owns 750 acres of that, with 300 acres contributing to the wastewater treatment plant. There are only 300 acres in other private uses. And so very few lands, Christie property, some lands down here that are still in private ownership in the city of Arcata. And again, as John had mentioned, the Coastal Commission retains jurisdiction for permitting in those zones. And so if we were going to do something, if we're going to raise a levee or do other kinds of development that would protect these ag uses into the future, we're going to be asking the Coastal Commission for permission to do that. And so I think it's, again, really important. I think that, I'm hearing some very encouraging things at the state level from the Coastal Commission in terms of how to interpret and modify the approach and the way that those policies are implemented. And I was encouraged to hear Kristen say that the Coastal Commission will continue to look towards the local jurisdictions, LCPs, when evaluating the issuance of their permits. But I do think that there's got to be a wholesale change in the way that we approach things like fill of wetlands, because we all recognize that in order to build these levees, you're going to be filling wetlands. There's got to be a wholesale change in the way that we evaluate the adaptation strategies and the measures that we're doing to, not just for ag lands, but for other lands as well, to try and squeeze out of them the best uses that we can between now and 70 years from now, when these things may not function the way that they function now. And so I just wanted to kind of zoom in. Melissa had given an example of areas where this had been done before. And this is sort of a pointed example of where you've taken what was reclaimed former tidelands, and I'm going to zoom in on this area right here, around Jacoby Creek, where an estuary was basically built and a levee was built behind that, which is, it's great work and it protects the ag lands behind it. And this was the result. So you have this fairly robust levee that was built around here, protecting the ag uses behind it. And I think that's the kind of thing that the Coastal Commission is encouraging us to do, to try and maintain these ag uses, but at the same time recognize that we've got to find other ways to build these levees, because you can't just say I'm building a levee to protect ag lands. You have to say I'm building a levee to create an estuary. And recognizing too that what this translates into, for those of us who are office bound and not out working near ag lands, what this translates into, if the analogy holds, is I'm going to come and carve out 1/10 of your office and use that for some other purpose so that you can continue to work. And as time goes on, I'm going to carve deeper and deeper into your office. And at some point, you've got a very small desk. So I just kind of wanted to leave with the thought that it's really important that we work together, not just engaging on the normal level that I think we typically think of engaging landowners on, which is tell us what you think, but engaging them in actually finding solutions to policy and legal challenges that we're all going to face, protecting ag lands, protecting developed lands, figuring out how to work into the future. Thank you.
And next we have Rob Holman, the Development Services Director for the City of Eureka, to talk about how Eureka is updating their local coastal program to address sea level rise.
Sorry, I can't stand still when I present, so I need to get this thing out of here. Okay, so it's an honor to be able to follow David and John, since we're all three really on the same page pretty often when we talk about these topics, and so it's nice to be able to build off of what they just said. I'm Rob Holman, Director of Development Services for the City of Eureka, so that's Economic and Community Development. And when it comes to ag lands in Eureka, like David, it's not something I spend a lot of time thinking about, to be completely honest. So this is all of our zone districts in the city. This is highlighting what we have as ag lands. Take away everything else, that's our ag lands. Zooming in on that, this little tiny guy up here is private. All of this is owned by the state. That is private, and the city owns this. So that is the extent of ag lands in the city of Eureka. So zooming down here on this area, that's the harbor entrance. Elk River Spit's over here. Golf course is over there. Just for context, here's the wastewater treatment plant. That's US 101. If we zoom in on this area here, this is the city-owned parcel. That is zoned ag lands, and it's not likely to stay that way much longer. So taking away the zoning there, this is the Elk River and its tributaries, and it's a real rough map there. But there's a levee, where's the laser pointer on this guy? There we go. There's a levee that stops the Elk River from inundating all of this, and this is diked former tidelands. And so what we're envisioning is a restoration project where the channel would be restored through here, and all of this would become tidal wetlands again. And up here on this parcel up here, there is the opportunity to do a kayak launch, and then there's the railroad tracks there. And so the question is, will sea level rise inundate this restoration project? This is what it looks like right now on the edge. The railroad tracks are right there. And this is what happens with time, right? So will sea level rise hit this side? Absolutely, but it's not even really sea level rise we need to worry about. Even under today's conditions, this property is vulnerable. And so are we going to do a big ecological restoration project here only to have sea level rise overtop it 3 years later and completely change the ecosystem again? So remember that this is across from the harbor entrance. Even without sea level rise, this gets maximum wave energy hitting it, so it's very vulnerable to tidal inundation with or without sea level rise. So what we're envisioning is a levee around the outside of it with a trail on top, so that this becomes the Eureka, or the Elk River Eco Park. Not only a restoration project, but also a place where people can recreate. So kayak, launch, trails, a whole new park. So not likely to be ag lands for much longer. We also have the railroad, remember, right along the edge there. So then, zooming in on this one, this is privately owned. The only thing I'm going to say about this is US 101 is directly to the west, and the railroad is to the west of that. Just keep that in mind. The state owns parcel and the other small parcel up here. 101 is just here, and the railroad is there. The sea level rise on Eureka's ag lands, you'll notice that in all those maps I didn't show you where sea level rise is projected to intersect those parcels. And I did that for a specific reason. Where will sea level rise occur on Eureka's ag lands? I would say, does that really matter, and is that the right question to ask? It's been the for years now. I don't know that that's the right question to ask. When will sea level rise occur on Eureka's ag lands? I don't think that's the right question to ask either. As Oleron pointed out, and thank you, Oleron, I just stole this slide from you while the break was happening. This is all former tidelands that we're talking about. So why, to some degree, sea level rise doesn't matter? They're diked former tidelands. All these lands are artificial. They're recovered from the bay. They're currently protected against tidal inundation by aging infrastructure. They're already vulnerable to tidal influence and tidal inundation, with or without sea level rise. And in fact, if we had sea level rise or sea level fall, and I struggled to come up with that term as I looked at a lot of synonyms of fall, but sea level fall, our ag lands would still be vulnerable. Sea level rise will only inundate those ag lands if we allow it to happen. And that's kind of, that's my introduction. So what I'm going to focus on is this last statement here. Sea level rise will only inundate ag lands or any lands if we allow it to happen. The flaw of sea level rise projection maps are that they assume that we're going to allow sea level rise to inundate the areas shown. So imagine for a moment a catastrophic downtown fire projection map. So you've got downtown Eureka and a fire starts in this building. We could do all kinds of sophisticated modeling to see where that fire would spread. And with prevailing winds and the type of architecture, it could spread something like that. And in fact, about 5 years ago, I was at a mapping conference in San Diego, and there was an older gentleman there that revolutionized how the Forest Service thinks about wildfires. And he said 30 years ago that with computer models, he could figure out where big fires are going to happen and how they're going to spread. And everyone laughed at him and joked, there's no way he could do that. And over time, he built up a really sophisticated GIS model using vegetation mapping and terrain and prevailing winds and temperature, and came up with really spectacular models to predict where major catastrophic fires were going to occur. And now the Forest Service uses those kinds of models to help them plan for catastrophic fires. But in Eureka, we spend almost $7 million a year with our fire department to stop this sort of thing from happening. So that when the fire is this big, our fire department rushes in. And it doesn't matter if it's 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon, there are just as many firefighters, no matter what time of day, ready to stop this fire from spreading. And so though we can map where catastrophic fire would occur, we're not allowing it to happen. And remember that number of nearly $7 million a year just to protect ourselves from fire. So the city invests millions of dollars annually to prevent catastrophic fires. We choose to stop that type of impact from occurring. I think we need to stop studying where sea level rise will occur and start asking ourselves where we're going to allow it to occur. This is a map, and I also stole this from Oleron, and it shows sea level rise and where it's going to inundate certain areas. I think that all of these need to have a really strong footnote that says, if we allow it to happen. It all comes down to time, money, and priorities. The modeling and the mapping will tell us how much time we have left to figure this out and how quickly we need to react. Money is going to restrain how much we can protect. The priorities are going to determine what we're going to protect first and what we're going to protect last. And that part is probably the most important thing to consider is we probably won't be able to protect everything. So what we choose that is the least important is the thing that's going to get inundated, and the thing that is the most important will be the things that will have the money and time to protect. So again, looking at this, you've got the state lands, 2 private parcels, and the city for ag lands, getting back to ag lands. At all 4 sites, the NCRA Railroad is the first line of defense against sea level rise. In 3 of the 4 sites, US 101 is the first line of defense. So these ag lands are not facing sea level rise alone. They have 2 major infrastructure providers in the way between them and sea level rise. And that's a really important component of all of this as well. The vast majority of Eureka's shoreline is artificial, and we've been holding back the bay since 1850 something. What we're proposing to do isn't any different than what we've been doing for 5, 6 generations. For sea level rise in general, Eureka's stance is defense, and our focus is not when is this going to happen, but what are we going to do about it. So some quick pictures. This is really what Eureka's facing when it comes to sea level rise, and this is why I spend so little time thinking about the ag lands. Not to say that they're unimportant, but Eureka's challenges with sea level rise have to do with the fact that our entire shoreline in Eureka is completely artificial. So in conclusion, I like to think a lot about the 1950 Community Development Director. I have a table in my office that is clearly older than my parents. My parents were both born in 1956. And so I think about the Community Development Director of 1950. And if I could go back and sit down with him at that table, which was probably in the office back then, that's how old the table is, and I say, listen, sea level rise is going to happen in 2050, 100 years from now, these parts of Eureka are going to be inundated by sea level rise. What would that community development director do? And now that we are looking 100 years into the future, I wish I could sit down with a community development director 100 years from now, or 50 years from now, and talk to them and find out what they feel like I really need to focus on. So, multi-generational planning, most planning occurs in 20-year increments. We're talking about 100-year increments. We need to talk about what matters most and how hard we're willing to protect it. Eureka stance is defense, and we're focusing on what we're going to do next. Thank you.